At the premiere of the film I edited, my partner of 11 years introduced the room to the woman who really understands him. Her name was in the credits, and I cut those credits, and it was not there when I locked the picture. 800 people in a converted power station, the kind of room where the seats are new and the brickwork is deliberately not, and the film had just come up on the last frame and the applause had gone on for the length of time that tells everybody in the industry the thing is going to have a life. Devin Roche went up the steps to the stage with a microphone in his hand and did 4 minutes, and he is very good at 4 minutes, and about 3 minutes in he said, "And I have to say something that I probably should have said earlier." He said, "Nobody makes a film like this alone." And somewhere around the second year I stopped being able to see it, and there was one person who could, who kept telling me the truth when it was expensive, and who understood what this was actually about before I did. And then he said, "Juno, stand up." And a woman 2 rows in front of me stood up, 27 years old, in a good jacket, and put her hand over her mouth, and 800 people applauded her for a while. I was in row 11, on the aisle, in the seat with my name on a piece of card taped to it, and the card said editor. Here is what I actually did, which is nothing, for about 90 seconds, and I want to explain why it was not shock. It was arithmetic. I had locked that picture on the 11th of February. I had cut the credit crawl myself, twice, once in December and once in February after a name change on the sound side, and I know what was in it, because an editor knows what is in a crawl the way a bricklayer knows what is in a wall. Juno Vasquez had not been in it, and 40 minutes earlier I had watched that same crawl go up on a screen in front of 800 people with the words thumbprint writer Juno Vasquez in it, in the same typeface, in the right position, correctly kerned, which means somebody had not slapped it on. Somebody had gone into the file and done it properly. So while a room applauded a young woman for understanding my partner, I was sitting in seat 11 doing the only thing I know how to do, which is working out who had the project open and when, and what else they moved while they were in there, because that is the actual job. People think an editor chooses shots. An editor keeps track of what happened. I met Devin Roche in a basement in 2014 in an edit suite that flooded twice a year on a film about a copper mine that nobody watched. He was 30 and had made nothing and had the specific confidence of a man who has never yet had a thing fail publicly. And I was 32 and had cut 11 films and had a reputation among about 40 people, which is what a reputation looks like in documentary. We were together 11 years, and we made 4 films, and the 4th one is the one this story is about. I want to put down what those 11 years were, briefly and without any music under it, because otherwise the rest of this sounds like a woman who was looking for a reason. He learned to cook exactly 6 things because I worked late, and he brought me one of the 6 to the suite about 300 times over 11 years. When my mother was dying in 2019, he drove to Dundee every second weekend for 14 months, and he never once made it a thing he had done. He is funny. He is properly funny. The kind where you have to put your coffee down. And at a rap party in 2018, he did 9 minutes about a sound recordist that I have thought about at random for 7 years. He also, and both of these are true at once, has never in his life been able to sit in a room with a version of himself that is not the best person in it, and every single professional decision he has made since 2016 comes out of that. And I could see it, and I told myself for 11 years that I was the one who kept him honest, which is a story that lets a person stay. There are 3 things I would tell you about the 11 years if you were deciding whether to be sorry for me. In 2016, a film of ours was pulled apart in a review by a critic who used the word amateurish, and Devin did not sleep for 2 days, and I sat up with him both nights, and on the 3rd morning he made a joke about it that was so good I laughed until I had to sit down on the floor. And that is the man. That is the actual man, and any version of him where he is only a fraud is a version I am lying to you about. In 2020, he told a commissioning editor in a meeting I was not in that he would not do the film without me, and I found out 4 years later from somebody else, and he had never mentioned it. And in 2022, he introduced me at a dinner as his collaborator, and then, 11 minutes later, at the same table, described the structure of our 3rd film as a thing he had worked out on a train. Both of those happened at one table on one night. I have stopped trying to reconcile them. He is a man who tells the truth when it costs him money and lies when it costs him the room, and there is no arrangement of those facts that makes him simple. The 4th film took 4 years. It is about a family called Farrell in a town where the plant closed, and the reason it works, the reason that room stood up, is a 9-minute sequence in the 2nd act that is one of 2 things I have made in 19 years that I would put in front of anybody. I built that sequence over 5 weeks in a suite on my own from 400 hours of material that nobody else had watched all the way through. Devin has said publicly twice that it came out of a conversation the 2 of them had in a car. It came out of a hard drive. An edit is not a file, it is a history. This is the part that is going to sound technical for 90 seconds and then stop sounding technical, and I need you to stay with me for it, because it is the entire reason there is an ending. When you cut a film in any professional application, the thing you are working in is a project, and a project is not a document that you save over. It writes autosaves on a timer into a folder indefinitely, and it keeps a version history, and every one of those versions is time-stamped, and every one of them carries the machine name and the user account of whoever had it open. On a 4-year film, there are somewhere between 11 and 14,000 autosaves. They live on the drives. Nobody cleans them out, because nobody thinks about them, because they are the digital equivalent of the sawdust on the floor. And when I got home from the power station at 1 in the morning, still in the dress, I did not call anybody, and I did not open a bottle. I sat down at the machine in the back room, and I opened the version history on a film I had locked in February, and I went looking for who touched what and when. The crawl was changed on the 2nd of March at 11:40 at night from a machine called Pryce Studio 2 under an account called H. Pryce. Halden Pryce is the executive producer. He is 61. He has 40 credits. He sits on 2 boards. He speaks at things, and I have been in perhaps 9 rooms with him in 4 years, and he has never once addressed me directly. He is exactly the man who does not appear in the story people tell about a film. And once I knew to look, the 2nd of March was not one edit. Between the 28th of February and the 9th of March, that project was opened 41 times from that machine, and the changes are all in the same category, and the category is not creative. Nobody moved a cut. Somebody restructured a credit block, changed a copyright line, altered a production company card, and swapped a delivery cut for a different assembly in the folder that the festival submission was pulled from, which meant the film that was submitted was not the film I delivered, which is a sentence that means nothing to a normal person, and which, in this industry, is a bomb. Juno Vasquez came to the suite on a Sunday, 11 days after the premiere, and I let her in, which surprised both of us. She stood in the doorway of a room she had been in maybe 4 times and said, "I know what you think this is." I said I did not think anything yet, which was true, and which she did not believe. She was shaking, and then she did something I did not expect, which is that she did not cry and she did not apologize. She said, "I want to tell you what I did, and I want to be accurate about it, because I think you're going to check anyway." And she was right. And I have since checked every single thing she said that day, and all of it was true. She said she had been hired in 2023 as an assistant producer at £41,000 a year. She said that in the second year Devin had started calling her at night about structure, and that she had given him 3 ideas, and that 2 of them are in the film, and 1 of them is genuinely good, and I know exactly which one it is, and I have always known, because I built it, and I remember arguing about it with him and not knowing where it came from. She said that in January Halden Pryce had taken her to lunch and asked whether she thought her contribution was a writing contribution, and she said she had sat in that restaurant and said yes. She said, "He didn't offer me anything. That's the thing I can't explain to anybody. He asked me a question and let me answer it, and then everything happened, and every time I've tried to describe it, since it sounds like I'm making excuses." And then she said the thing that got through, and it got through because it was aimed at something true. She said, "You've been in this 19 years, and you're the best person I've ever watched work, and you have a credit that says editor, and a fee that's 4% of the back end, and you've never once asked for more, and I watched that for 2 years, and I decided I wasn't going to be you." I did not have an answer for that. I have one now, 11 months later, and it is not a good enough one to have been worth waiting for. What I said at the time was, "Get out of my suite," and she went, and I sat there for about 2 hours because the accusation was accurate. I have taken editor credit and 4% on 4 films that other people's names are on, and I have told myself for 19 years that the work is the point, and a 27-year-old had just correctly identified that as a habit and not a philosophy. What I did next is the only part of this I am proud of, and it took me 3 days to get to it. I stopped being angry at the person who wanted more than I had ever asked for, and I went and found out who had used her. They came for me in May, and they did it the polite way, which is the way that works. I was asked to a meeting at the production office to discuss, in the words of the email, the delivery paperwork. Halden Pryce was not there. Pryce is never there. There was a line producer I like, a lawyer I had never met, and Devin and the lawyer explained that the production had identified an irregularity in the delivery materials, that the version I had delivered in February appeared to differ from the version submitted to the festival, and that they would like my help understanding how that had happened. That is a beautiful piece of work, and I want to give it its due. In one sentence, he had taken the thing Pryce did on the 2nd of March and handed it to me to explain. And then he made the offer, which was that the production would like to engage me as a consulting editor through the awards run at a fee that was, and I checked afterward, about 11 times what I had been paid to actually cut the film, and that there would be a mutual release. Devin said, "Mar, take it." He said it in front of them. I said, "What am I releasing?" The lawyer said it was standard. I said, "It's a release. It has a subject. What is the subject? And the room did the thing rooms do, which is that everybody looked at a different part of the table. And the line producer, who I like, said, "Mara," in the voice you use with a horse. I said I would think about it. I went home and I did not sign it, and 11 days later my access to the production drives was revoked at 9 in the morning, and I got an email at 9:40 saying it was an insurance requirement, which is the same lie the Ashfords tell and the same lie every production tells. And by then I had the 11,400 autosaves on 2 drives in a cupboard in Dundee at my aunt's house, because I had copied everything on the night of the premiere before I got out of the dress. The Farrell family signed in 2021. That is the piece that turned a professional grievance into something with teeth, and I found it because of a release form and not because of anything clever. When you film people, you get an appearance release, and a release names the production, and the production it names is the production that is allowed to use the material. In 2021, Devin and I shot 4 days with the Farrells for a completely different film, a half-hour piece for a broadcaster that never got made, and that footage sat on a drive for 2 years. 40 seconds of it is in the 9-minute sequence. It is the best 40 seconds in the film. It is the mother in the kitchen at night with the radio on, and it is the reason the sequence works. And I put it there in 2023, and I flagged it at the time in writing in an email on the 9th of May to Devin and to the production coordinator, saying we needed to repaper the Farrells for this film before delivery. I have the email. Nobody ever did it. And on the 2nd of March, when Halden Pryce was in that project at 11:40 at night, one of the 41 things he did was change the copyright line and the production company card, which moved the film's ownership into a different corporate vehicle, which is the vehicle that has the back end in it, and which meant that the entity that now owned the film had no release from the Farrell family for any of it, not the 40 seconds, any of it, because the release names a production that no longer had the picture. I sat with that for a week, and I did the thing I keep telling you I did, which is that I did not go to a lawyer, and I did not go to the press. A lawyer means a letter means a settlement means an NDA, and an NDA means Halden Pryce keeps 40 credits and does it again in 18 months to somebody who is 27. And the press means a story about a woman whose boyfriend left her. People ask why I did not simply put the 2nd of March on the internet, and I understand why they ask, because it is 11,000 autosaves and a timestamp, and it would have taken 4 minutes. Here is the answer, and it is not nobility. A post is a claim. The moment it is a claim, it is my word about a machine name against a man with 40 credits and a publicist. And within a day, the story is not the credit restructure. The story is that the director's ex-partner is posting about him after he thanked another woman from a stage. And I know that is the story because I have watched it happen to 2 women in this industry, and I did not defend either of them properly at the time. The arbitration is the opposite of a post. It is anonymous. It is technical. It is decided by 3 people who cut film for a living and who do not care who anybody is sleeping with. And its finding is not an allegation. It is a determination. I wanted a determination. So I waited. I waited from March to November, through a festival run, through 2 prizes, and I let that man carry that film around the world. And in November it was nominated, and a nomination triggers the one thing that cannot be settled quietly, which is the Guild's credit arbitration, because a credited writer on a nominated film gets a statuette, and the guild does not let anybody negotiate that in a hotel bar. I filed on the second day of the window. The guild seats 3 arbiters, and none of them are named. That is the whole design of it. You do not know who they are. They do not know whose material they are reading. The submissions are stripped of names and replaced with letters, and it is the only forum I have ever been in where being famous is worth nothing at all. I submitted 11,400 autosaves. I want to say that again because it is my favorite sentence in this entire story. I submitted the complete version history of a 4-year film as an indexed exhibit with a 19-page cover document explaining how to read a timestamp, and the guild's technical consultant went through it for 6 weeks. And what that history shows, in a way that no witness can argue with and no lawyer can characterize, is who touched what and when. It shows that the structure of the second act was built between the 4th of September and the 11th of October 2023, on my machine, under my account, in 241 versions. It shows the 9-minute sequence being assembled over 5 weeks in a single user session pattern that is unmistakably one person working alone at night. It shows Juno Vasquez's account touching the project on 9 occasions across 2 years, all of them logging notes, none of them structural, and it shows the 2nd of March at 11:40 at night from Pryce Studio 2. Counsel for the production argued that autosaves prove custody and not authorship, which is the strongest argument available, and which is also true, and I had 11 weeks to prepare for it because I had been making the same objection to myself since March. So the answer went in as an appendix. If a structure arrives in a project from a conversation, the versions show it arriving, which is to say, you see a jump, a session opens, and the shape is suddenly different, and there is no working. Across 241 versions in that 6-week window, there is not one jump. There are 241 increments, and 11 of them are the same 3 shots reordered, and one of them at 4:10 in the morning on the 29th of September is a cut being moved 4 frames and then moved back. Nobody has that conversation in a car. Devin's testimony was that the writing was a 2-year conversation, which is not a lie, exactly, and that is what makes him what he is, rather than what his mother thinks he is. Halden Pryce did not testify. Halden Pryce sent counsel, and counsel argued jurisdiction for 11 days and lost. And Juno Vasquez gave evidence for 4 hours and told the arbitration the truth, all of it, including the lunch in January and including the sentence she said to me in the suite. And she did that knowing exactly what it would cost her, and she has never once asked me for anything since. The determination came back in 6 lines, which is how they come back. Sole writing credit to Devin Roche, Juno Vasquez removed, and then the sentence that killed the film, which I had asked for in my submission, and which I did not expect to get, which is that the arbiters referred the submission irregularity to the guild's board, because the cut submitted to the festival was not the cut delivered by the production, and the entity that submitted it did not hold the rights it claimed to hold. Thank you for listening to Channel Crystal Novel. The disqualification came through in March, and I am not going to pretend to you that it felt good, because I had 4 years in that picture, and it is the best thing I have ever done, and almost nobody will ever see it. The nomination was withdrawn. The distributor terminated under a rights warranty, which they were entitled to do the moment the feral release problem was on paper. The film has not been released in any territory, in any window, and it will not be, because the corporate vehicle Pryce built to hold it is now the defendant in 2 actions, and nobody will insure a title with that history. 4 years. A 9-minute sequence that I built alone in a room over 5 weeks that 800 people stood up for in a power station, and it is on a drive in a cupboard, and that is a thing I did with my own hands, on purpose, with full knowledge, and I would do it again. And it is the closest I have come to grief since my mother, Halden Pryce, was expelled from the guild in the summer, which sounds decorative and is not, because you cannot executive produce a guild picture if you are expelled, and his other 2 productions removed him within a month. He is 62. He has a consultancy now. 2 people have told me, with real satisfaction, that he is finished. And I do not believe them, because men like that are never finished. They are just quieter, and they surface in a different city in 4 years. And the only actual victory is that the next 27-year-old at that lunch will be able to find his name in a search result. The Guild published a technical bulletin the following spring on the evidentiary treatment of nonlinear project histories and credit disputes, which cites an anonymized case that is obviously this one, and which means that the next editor who files does not have to write a 19-page document explaining what a timestamp is. 2 festivals changed their submission rules to require that the submitting entity warrant it holds the rights in the exact cut submitted, which is 1 line. The line producer I like was not disciplined, gave a statement, and has not worked with Pryce since, and sent me a message in the summer that said only, "You were right about the release. Sorry about the hoarse voice." The Farrell family were paid a settlement in the autumn that I am not permitted to describe, and that I am permitted to say I thought was inadequate. I drove up and sat in that kitchen for 3 hours, and told the mother, whose name is Rosalie, exactly what had happened to her 4 days of 2021, and she listened to all of it and then said, "So nobody sees it?" And I said no, and she said, "That's a shame, love. You were good with him," meaning her son, meaning the 4 days, and that is the review I have, and it is the one I would have picked. Devin and I are finished. It ended on a Tuesday in the spring, in a kitchen, in about 11 minutes, and the only thing he said that I still think about is, "You could have come to me in March," and it is true, and I have turned it over a great deal, and the honest answer is that in March I did not go to him because I already knew what he would do, which is that he would have gone to Pryce and been reassured and come back to me warm and certain and slightly disappointed in my suspicion, and I would have believed him because I had believed him for 11 years, and I was extremely good at it. Juno Vasquez cuts trailers now for a company in Manchester and is, by every account, exceptional at it, and she wrote to me in June asking if I would look at a personal piece she had made, 40 minutes, her own money, and I said yes, and I gave her 9 pages of notes, and the first note says that the second act is not a structure, it is a hope. She has since made it work. And I am cutting again, a film about a swimming pool for a director I have never met, on a proper contract that I read myself, with a lawyer I paid for, that has a back end in it, and a clause about credit, and a clause about the project file. I have that clause in every contract I sign now. It is 2 sentences long, and it says the editor retains a copy of the complete project history, and that the production may not alter the locked project without a written change order. Nobody has ever refused it. Not one producer, not once, in 19 months, and I have signed 6 contracts, which tells you it was always available. and I had simply never asked for it in 19 years. That is the part I would want a young editor to take out of this, if anybody is going to take anything out of it. It was never that they were powerful. It is that I never asked, and I made a philosophy out of not asking, and then a 27-year-old in a good jacket looked at me across a suite and named it out loud. So here is what I want to know from you, since you have been sitting in row 11 with me the whole way. Did she go far enough, or was she still too merciful? Comment just as if the ending was perfect. Comment harder if you wanted an even colder revenge. Your comments decide how ruthless the next ending should be. Like and subscribe if you want to be here for the next